The Secrets of Stargate is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Stargate.
Lieutenant West, Jackson has identified the seventh symbol.
All right, here we go. We are about to try to make a connection.
All we gotta do is bust out of here, commandeer the ship, and fly on home.
Indeed. You say that a lot.
I know that this could be dangerous. But this is our job, right? It's what we signed on to do.
It was never about going home. It's about getting us to where we're going.
Hi, I'm Jack Barazzini, and you're listening to The Secrets of Stargate, where we talk about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. Joining me today are Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father.
How's it going, Jack?
Pretty good. How about you? And Lisa Jones. Hi, Lisa.
How are you?
Doing well.
Good.
And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hi, Jack.
Today we are discussing the series premiere of Stargate SG-1, Children of the Gods. Children of the Gods is the series premiere of SG-1, and it picks up about a year after the events of the film. The episode opens with a group of airmen playing poker while they guard the inactive Stargate. The Stargate awakens, and alien warriors wearing Cobra armor come through the gate. They capture a female soldier and kill the rest before returning through the gate. Jack O'Neill, who's been retired and taken up astronomy, is recalled to duty at Stargate Command and is reactivated by General Hammond, who is now in command of the Stargate program. O'Neill is able to convince General Hammond not to send a nuke through the gate and destroy Abydos, and instead send through a box of Kleenex. The box comes back through the gate with a note from Dr. Daniel Jackson. They're able to meet up with Dr. Daniel Jackson. We get introduced to new characters like Samantha Carter. Old characters like Kowalski and Ferretti also return, and we're introduced to the Goa'uld for the first time, including Apophis, who is the main villain for the season. All right, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the differences in the canon from the movie and the TV show.
Sure. Well, one big thing that you mentioned, the name Goa'uld. You don't hear that at all in the movie. We don't know what this race is that Ra comes from. We just know that he's an alien race who they kind of sort of make it sound like he's some kind of parasite, but the movie makes it look more like he's an alien who has taken on his human form instead of actually being a parasite. Well, we get more development on that we find out, yes, they are very much snakehead parasites, as you will hear them called many times.
They kind of remind me of Evil Trill.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a lot of ways they are.
Because in the movie, he looked like kind of like your typical gray alien that you'd see in any science fiction film. And they never really explain how he took over the body of the Egyptian boy. It's just he did that. But in this show, they really go through the whole process. Like when he comes through the gate later on in the episode, Apophis and the Jaffa warriors come through the gate, and they take Shari, Daniel Jackson's wife, and Skara. And later on, we see how they're implanted with the Goa'uld parasites. It's kind of like they crawl through the back of your neck and take over your brain.
Yeah, and so we do get to meet for the first time here Apophis, who is the show's version of Ra for at least the first season or two. And, where Ra ruled the day, Apophis rules the night. And he is not really fleshed out very well in this first episode either. So that's something else we can talk about.
But one big thing I think this episode does, of course, is it pretty much exists to establish there's a lot bigger universe out there than just the one gate going to the other gate on these two planets. Instead, there's tons of gates, and we'll talk about that in a minute, how they establish that. There's tons of bad guys, because they say that, well, maybe Ra wasn't the last one. I guess we just found another one, so maybe there's more out there. Yeah, there's a lot more out there.
Yeah.
I think this episode gives them the motivation for why they want to go through the Stargate and keep going through the Stargate.
It really sets up the premise for the entire show.
Yeah. And I like that. It's like, oh, why don't we just bury it? It's like, they know we're here and they're coming for us. They could just do it the old-fashioned way and fly here.
Well, and we've also got to go now find our friends, right? Save the wife, save the friend. Exactly. So that gives them personal motivation.
And it does set up one of the tropes on this series, which is a lot of the difficulties they face, a lot of the enemies that threaten Earth. It's really kind of SG-1's fault that they are, that Earth is under attack so often, because SG-1 is out there sticking their nose where it doesn't belong, and then trying to fix the problems that they create. So I find that very relatable.
I really like the scene where they're back on Abydos and Daniel shows them the big room with all the different cartouches that have the addresses for the different planets, and that's where they figure out where instead of the gate just going from Earth to Abydos, they can go anywhere else. But they figure out that because of the expansion of the universe, they're going to have to account for the differences in distance over thousands of years. Which I was wondering about that as I was watching it because of time dilation. I wonder how that factors into that whole thing. They don't really touch on that, and I'm not sure if they do later on in the series.
They kind of take it as an assumption that the whole purpose of that room with all the cartouches is, here's the map that we're going to use. Now, imagine if you had a road map, but the world was stretching. And that's basically the principle they're doing is you'd still be able to figure out if I take these roads, I'd still get there. It just take longer to get there. They just got, we'll just punch this into a computer and the computer will, think of like Starry Night or one of the, astronomy software packages just souped up that can then say, okay, since it was like this, now it's like this.
Yeah, definitely just can extrapolate out to where everything would be. We also get to see the control panel that controls the gate on the Abydos side, which we never see in the original movie. It looks like a big rotary dial, basically. Which I thought was funny.
You'll get to see a lot of it.
The DHD.
DHD, for those who don't know, stands for Dial Home Device.
Don't forget your GDO when you're using the DHD.
And they have fun with it. Because, of course, it's military. The Air Force likes their acronyms. And so, of course, they had to kind of play with it. But, they gave it, like I said, named Dial Home Device and Garage Door Opener. And
lots of acronyms in this show.
So we get Michael Shanks is replacing James Spader as Daniel Jackson, and we get Richard Dean Anderson, who's MacGyver, which is funny because they actually do a MacGyver reference in there. He's replacing Kurt Russell as Jack O'Neill. And I've got to say, just from the first episode, I like the casting in the show better than in the movie, which I guess is a good thing because they're going to be there for the long haul.
Well, and Michael Shanks, he starts out with the James Spader, but he changes it because you'll see over that's 10 seasons and beyond, he completely changes this character. And he's still got the geeky, nerdy Dr. Jackson, but he really changes it in his own way. And he said in interviews that he really felt pressured when he first took on the role to basically imitate James Spader. But then he kind of realized a season or two in, it's like, wait a second, this is my character now. I've played this character a lot more than he has. And that's where he kind of starts changing it. Richard Dean Anderson, he pretty well takes the character and makes it himself. I mean, he didn't take a lot from Kurt Russell. A little bit. You can kind of see a little bit of it, but not much.
Yeah. And I think the way that Richard Dean Anderson kind of created that new character, it just really set the tone for the entire series. It has so much, like you said, the wit and the humor and sarcasm just woven through it.
Yeah, the one line where the character really clicked for him, I read, was at the end where Teal'c is freed everybody, and Richard Dean Anderson is saying, "Come with us." And Teal'c says, "I have no place to go." Jack O'Neill says, "For this, you can stay at my place." That was kind of like the, the Midwestern witty kind of humorous remark that defined his character.
And the MacGyver reference, which I believe we do get a few more later on, but I read that was an ad lib by Amanda Tapping, so that was kind of fun.
And she threw in others as well, that outtakes and things like that. There's one scene, there's an episode, I think it's later this season, where they're in the frozen. It's Jack O'Neill and Sam Carter. They're frozen by the Stargate. And there's an outtake where, "I'm with MacGyver. We should be able to get out of this. We've got a belt and a pocket knife. You should be able to build a nuclear reactor or something." And Richard Dean Anderson just looks at the camera like, who set her up to this?
I heard that the principal cast did gel very quickly early on. Christopher Judge has mentioned that Michael Shanks, Amanda Tapping, and him just kind of, and Richard Dean Anderson just kind of had chemistry very early on.
We should also talk about the character of Samantha Carter, who's introduced here, played by Amanda Tapping. That intro scene with her, it felt very dated, I gotta say.
They fixed it.
It's so cringy.
It was dated when they shown it. I mean, it was, and they, there's that one line in there that everybody remembers.
Yes.
And it comes back to haunt the series several times. it gets poked at several times throughout the rest of the run of the series. Even the writers realized this was a stupid line.
Mm-hmm. And I read that Amanda Tapping hated having to say it. Yeah. My 14-year-old was watching it and she with me this week, and she hadn't seen it in a couple of years. We haven't watched the first one over again in a long time. And she just was like, that's bad. Like, that's just trying too hard. What were they thinking?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I guess they were trying to set up the whole I am woman, but I have credentials and I'm amazing. And it was bad.
And they do take that line in the 2009 final cut that Brad Wright put together. They do take that line out. You'll be happy to know. Yeah, I've unfortunately have not been able to watch that, but I did read that. And yeah, there are some points during that sequence, where you're like, gosh, dial it back. But on the other hand, she's the only woman in a room full of Air Force top brass. And so I think, naturally you would come on a little strong to assert yourself just to, win their respect. And it is kind of neat though. As soon as she steps through the Stargate, or even when the Stargate is on and before she steps through it, but certainly when she gets to Abydos, there is that giddy, electric energy of like, oh, this is so cool. Look at this. This is cool. This is cool. And there's no more of that. So I think it kind of was that, I'm the only woman in a room full of men.
For those who haven't seen the show, they really dial back the, again, I am woman, hear me roar, like big time and quickly. I think they realized it was bad, but I still love Jack O'Neill's response. It's not that you're a woman. I like women.
Yeah.
It's you're a scientist. I don't like science. I hate scientists.
Yeah. Pretty much after that scene, they just kind of gel as a team and it becomes more irrelevant to them. And so I always felt like that was just such a scene. Just, they tried too hard.
It just felt like they pushed it so hard in that scene. Like they have her like standing in the shadows and they use her nickname Sam instead of Samantha. And it just seemed like a very odd way to introduce a character, like setting them off to be antagonistic right from the beginning. Yeah. But then they don't do anything with it, which is good.
And she was late.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, the scene where she and Daniel Jackson meet is wonderful, right? That she's so excited and she introduced herself as doctor, and Jack O'Neill's like, thought you wanted to be captain. And they just, she and Daniel Jackson just start talking and figuring all this out. And that was the chemistry between the two of them. I just love that, the way they played off each other.
Daniel actually refers to her as Captain Doctor at one point. And that just leaves on the principal cast. We have Teal'c then, who's played by Christopher Judge. And I can't imagine anyone else in that role. And how he actually got the role is pretty funny too. He was a big fan of the movie, and he went over to his best friend's house, and his best friend's roommate was actually reading. I don't know if it was for the role of Teal'c or some other role. And he listened. He was like, "Is this like Stargate you're reading for?" And he immediately left, called his agent, and said, "If you don't get me an audition for this Stargate show, I'm walking." I think a week or two later, he was auditioning for the role of Teal'c and
nice.
Got it.
I really liked how he communicated his unease with what Apophis was doing, because he's the first prime Jaffa of Apophis. He's the leader of his army, basically, or his royal guard. And throughout the episode, he doesn't really say a lot. You can tell from his body language that he's not really cool with all these people being willy-nilly executed. So I feel like they did a really good job of setting that up without saying anything. So when it actually happens, it doesn't feel like it's out of the blue when he defects over and helps Jack O'Neill and them to escape.
Yeah, well, you even see it like right from the beginning where they walk through the gate for the first time onto Earth, and they're blasting all the security forces there and everything, and he picks up a fire M16 and kind of goes, "These humans aren't as dumb as we thought they were. There's something more here." And that's where you can tell that's where kind of the wheels start spinning a little bit of, there might be somebody that can go against this so-called god.
Yeah, I know. Speaking of that first scene where they walk in, I do have to say that I was watching it with my wife, and she had left the room for a minute to get something. She comes in right as they come through with the big Cobra head helmets on. She's like, "What is this?" I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about that too. So I don't really understand what Apophis's plan is here. Is he randomly dialing Stargate addresses? If he gets a lock, he sends that little gold probe ball through. It scans the room. If there's any kind of woman there, he comes through himself with his guards. He doesn't just send his guards to kidnap. He comes through himself. And it seems like he could more effectively delegate some of that.
Yeah.
But But on the other hand, I can argue with his methods, but I can't really argue with his results.
He's looking for his future wife. So, I mean, you guys who, you're dating, when you're dating your wives, you can't just send someone else to find the wife for you. You got to go do it yourself. Even if you're going to abduct her and make her, take on a symbiote, but still.
Very good.
You still got to have that.
Definitely.
Still got to have that meet cute, right?
Was a good introduction for him, right?
And apparently the updated cut also explains my one big problem with that scene, which was, they leave, right? They fire up the Stargate and leave. And I'm like, do they know how to use like the computers? But I guess they make it more clear in the recut that they manually dialed the gate, which they do later on in the show. So
yeah, and that's another thing we should mention is there's actually 3 different versions of this episode. There's the original 90-minute version that was shown, I think, on Showtime when the show first came out, and then there is a 2-part version that's cut down for time and for content that was the syndicated version, and then there is a recut version that came out in 2009 where, like you were saying, Victor, they redubbed people's lines. I think Michael Shanks redubbed his entire dialogue, and they also cut out this really unnecessary, like, mature scene that didn't need to be in there.
And it was literally put in there just because Showtime wanted it. There was no reason for it. As far as I recall, and Victor and Lisa, you can correct me on this. There's no place where we see full nudity like that anywhere else in the series. There's places that's hinted. Then there's a couple of scenes involving Amanda tapping that geeks really like, but you don't see anything. But it's hinted.
Well, there is actually, I should say that the show is full of nudity, starting midway through season 1 all the way through parts of Atlantis. And you'll see it if you watch it on a video service that is very popular. It'll pop up at the beginning with the nudity warning. And after 6 or 7 episodes, I was like, where is this nudity? And then Thor walks on stage. And I'm like, of course, Thor.
Oh, you're kidding.
Apparently.
Yes, the puppet. Yeah.
So the alien gets a nudity warning.
Some of the streaming services, they just, if one episode has nudity, they flag the whole series for nudity. If it has violence, they flag the whole thing, whatever. So for human beings being nude, this is the only scene.
Yeah. So where do you watch the 2009 director's cut?
I don't know it.
I could not find it. I was looking for it. As of this recording, the version on Netflix is the full 90-minute original version with that scene. And then on Hulu, it's the 2 separated 44-minute episodes with the stuff cut out.
See, I'm wondering if it's one of those things where the only way you can get it is if you get the DVD with it.
I think that's what it is.
Probably. I'll have to go, but I think my DVD set, I have to look and see what year we bought it to see if it's on there, but I think I would remember that if they recut it.
5 seasons is the original box set. I think any of the DVD sets are not going to have this unless it specifically says on their pilot. And so I'm sure it's one of those things they've released, and you could go spend $10 on eBay or something and get it. But
yeah, I mean, just reading Brad Wright's comments on, the first episode, and then he felt so passionately. He was pushed by MGN and Showtime to say, you're on cable, you can do violence, you can do nudity, and do it. And he felt so terrible about it afterwards that, he released that updated cut and he vowed never to do it again. And I think, that's what made the show such a great family show for people to watch with their kids. And then, the kids of those people are now watching it with their kids. And it's definitely a very upbeat, fun show.
And it is funny to see, again, that it was for the first 5 seasons on a premium channel. It was on Showtime, and Showtime is not exactly known for being family friendly even on a good day. Yeah, especially back then, because you had Skinamax and Showtime were the 2 really bad ones, and HBO was a little bit better, but it still had some pretty rough stuff. And of course now you see what they put on, like with Game of Thrones, what was on that, so I mean, the idea of Game of Thrones being family friendly, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it did stand out, right? When you would sit down on Friday nights, because we got Showtime just to watch it. And I don't know if we watched anything else on Showtime.
And I think a lot of that is down to, Brad Wright, certainly Jonathan Glassner being the 2 showrunners, but also having Richard Dean Anderson in as a, executive producer or whatever his title was, calling the shots. That was a big part of it. And of course, there was someone else calling the shots too. And that was the United States military, whose involvement, they basically had, I think, final sign off on every script. It led to some pretty funny situations that we'll get to as we watch through some of the episodes.
Nice. Yeah, the Air Force especially was heavily involved in this, and so what's funny is, of course, having served in the Air Force, there are bugs. There are errors that I see in especially uniforms that suddenly don't show up quite so much later on. They tend to be pretty solid on uniforms after this. And I'm sure that's Air Force saying that's not how you use our uniform. Let us show you how this is done. You know.
So tell me, when they're around the conference table and they're in their dress blues, we don't see that later in the season.
The funny part is the only time I would ever have to wear my dress blues would be something like a commander's call or something like that, something a formal event. I do know in some places that is, like, especially if you're meeting with the general, and we'll talk, speaking of a central character who very much, he's kind of a secondary character, but he is very much a central character in this series, is General Hammond. But yeah, if you're meeting with the general, you would be wearing your dress blues, but otherwise, if you're just in your work environment, you would be in just like the blue shirt, like what Master Sergeant Harriman is wearing, the guy who dials in, another fun character, not so much central, but fun. But, like what he's wearing, the short sleeve shirt or something like that, or the camos. Like a lot of time I was in the Air Force, I was wearing the BDUs, the camos, which, let's be honest, that's wearing your pajamas to work. Those are so comfortable.
Yeah, and Gary Jones, not Harriman when the show starts.
Yeah, so
he's a regular Sergeant Davis, I think. Yeah.
And he's also at this point he's a Master Sergeant.
His name
one
changes.
stripe on top and a whole bunch of stripes below, and then he becomes a chief where there's three stripes up top and below, and it changes. That's one of those things where, again, looking at all the different uniforms, and there's times that Kowalski is captain, sometimes he's major. He's called major at some points, he's called captain at others. There's a lot of little loosey goosey stuff that they do fix eventually in this, but it's just kind of like, wait a second, those are captain's bars,
right?
I thought he was a major.
Jack, since you haven't watched all the episodes yet, Walter Harriman Davis, whatever you want to call him, who says Chevron 1 and lock are engaged, and just keep an eye on him, because in a couple of, I don't know, I can't remember what season, but they'll call him out. And I remember the first time thinking, has this guy been there the whole time? I never noticed him before. And it was only when they called him out, like season 4, that I went back, and he's been in all the shows.
He's there the whole series.
So he's like the Gunther of the series.
Yeah.
Nice.
They do have an interview episode, quote unquote interview episode later, where he gets to talk about his technique at calling out the chevrons.
Oh, that's fun. That's something I also have appreciated so far. I've watched a few episodes ahead of this one, and this really scratches that 90s fun science fiction itch, which a lot of modern TV shows really don't have. Like, that's been one of my main complaints with like Star Trek Discovery or Picard, or even like The Expanse. Like, they're just so dour, and I feel like science fiction has forgotten how to have fun. So this has been really enjoyable to watch.
Well, I will say, that Secrets of Star Trek, I got to throw in the pitch. That's been one of our critiques with things like Discovery, Picard a little bit, but definitely Discovery is they're too much into the dark. They're too much into the big overarching story that they have to advance. And one thing about SG-1 is, there are some stories they advance, and we set some of them up. The issues with Shara, the issues with Skara, having to deal with all that. But then they have a bunch of just fun episodes.
Yeah.
That are just standalone, Planet of the Week. We go kill the bad guys. We save the good guys. We go back home.
Right.
And I think some of that too is right out of the gate. Before they filmed anything, they had a 44 episode order, so they didn't have to do a pilot and then tweak it and stuff. They they had 44 episodes locked up before they started filming, and that was one of the things that got Richard Dean Anderson Anderson engaged. But so you're going to get a lot of the fun Planet of the Weeks, and when a TV season now is 8 or 9 episodes, you just don't have any breathing room for that.
It seems like it really. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so we.
Yes, I was just going to say that too. Yeah, we got to go. So.
I would say we should jump back and talk about General Hammond.
General Hammond of Texas.
Yeah. So General Hammond, of course, he's the replacement for General West. General West was the general in the movie. He's since been replaced with Don S. Davis, who's an amazing actor. I mean, anything you've ever seen him in, he's eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord. Sadly, he did pass away a few years ago, but he excellent, amazing actor, and he it's interesting the introduction of him. Jack, let me ask you, what do you think of him just off of this first episode?
He definitely comes across almost as a caricature of a military general. Like, I almost expect him to have like a cigar sticking out of his mouth, kind of like a Winston Churchill, almost that kind of vibe. And he also doesn't seem to be particularly keen on the whole Stargate thing. But I've noticed, even just watching a few episodes ahead, like, he's going to really grow on me fast.
Oh, he very much becomes a major character in the show, and very much beloved character in the show. He really comes across, and that's what struck me when I was watching this, is I forgot how gruff he was the first half of this episode. I mean, how he was like, I'm surprised I didn't hear him, say, Colonel O'Neill, attention, snap to attention, let's go. But he very much develops, and he does start out, I'm not so sure about this. I don't think this is the right idea. Eventually he warms up to the point that he actually looks forward to when he gets to go through the gate eventually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and he was really mean. Like looking back at it now, and there is one moment in this episode where you can kind of see the sparkle or the twinkle in his eye, and that's when he's moments away from sending the now it's a Mark 5 nuke through the we increment our marks every time they introduce a nuke on the show, but he's moments away from sending it through. Jack O'Neill is standing on the ramp up to the gate, and he says, "You can't do this." And he's like, "I have no choice." And then he says, "Unless there's something you've left out of your report." And the way he says it, there's just this little twinkle in his eye, and you can tell he's just playing O'Neill just ever so slightly. And that's the Hammond that we'll know and love.
Yeah, and eventually he will become known as Hammond of Texas.
Yes.
Right.
Very much so.
Becomes kind of a father figure to many of them. They look up to, a friend, yeah. It was, I agree with what y'all said. It was kind of interesting to think back of how he was initially presented,
talking
as opposed to where he
about
comes.
his grandkids.
No.
As he does later on in the series.
Because it almost seems like he's set up to be an antagonist in the first few scenes, but it seems like even by the second half of this episode, they've dropped that.
Right.
No, that's major.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
No, almost like they were trying to carry on the General West.
He's the one that's the
theme.
Oh, yeah.
They got to have. Sorry.
He's just he's just kind of written as
I love him.
Yeah,
I love him. He's
stop.
I mean,
Stop.
I love him because he's just so bureaucratic and by the book, and he's not evil. Like we'll get a lot of evil colonels and stuff down the road, and then we get Major Davis, who's kind of just like he's helpful and stuff. But Major Samuels, he's like in the 80s movie whenever you would have like the principals like Toady or something, and he's good. I like him. And we get a new Ferretti here as well as a new Kowalski. And Ferretti in this one is played by Brent State, who I love Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, which is the Kevin Sorbo sci-fi show. And if you've ever watched that, there's a priest on it who's actually a giant carnivorous bat, but he is a priest, and Reverend Rev Bem on that show is played by Brent State, and so it was good to see him without his Magog makeup on. But a different show, but it's just good to see those same Canadian actors work their way through all the different shows.
It is fun to see different actors in different roles, some connections that can be made between the different series and everything. And you do see the same actors kind of coming on, and we'll see that too throughout Stargate, that there'll be actors, and we talked about that already, or there are actors who are in the movies that later show up in the series and everything, so that's kind of fun to watch for. One thing I will say, though, I just looking at all the characters, one of the biggest complaints about Star Trek especially is it takes a season for the characters to really gel. You don't have that here. Within a couple of episodes, our characters that we love are there. Frankly, by the end of this episode, some of those characters have already kind of gelled.
Right. It's funny to compare this to like Encounter at Farpoint. And just how incredibly stilted and uncomfortable,
trigger warning,
uncomfortable that episode is to watch. Like, whenever I have friends ask me where they should start with Star Trek, I always tell them start with the third season of Next Generation. You can watch the first two seasons afterwards once you actually like the show, but if you try to start with that, you're going to hate it. And this does not seem to have that same issue.
And if you want to hear an epic epic rant. Just go listen to Secrets of Star Trek about that episode.
Oh, that's a good one.
We had way too much fun with Encounter at Farpoint. But yeah, there's so many. So that is one just, and maybe that says a lot to the writers and the actors, because there's great actors, but the writers as well. You know, the creators, Jonathan Glasner and Brad Wright, they got the basics of this series down very quickly, and it just ran. And we see that in here again, you know, with some of the issues we've talked about, that they kind of realized later, yeah, that was dumb, but we had to do it because they took the what the movie gave them and they ran with it well.
Right. Even
and they had been big fans of the movie, and they were pitching this show to MGM while they were both working on The Outer Limits, which is the 1990s Outer Limits. I actually think it's a really good, kind of Twilight Zone-y anthology show. And when they finally got the go ahead, they locked themselves in a room for 3 months and just rewatched the movie, thought about how can we expand on this and everything, and their hard work paid off.
Because just this first episode is much better than the movie. I feel like takes the idea and then does something much more interesting than just a one-off movie with it. And I was reading that Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, who wrote and directed the original movie, have absolutely nothing to do with this series, and they've said they don't want anything to do with it, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They said they still haven't the idea to make a separate, continue their trilogy. Yeah, which I'm kind of confused why you would. You created something that was a foundation for an incredible long-running.
Well, I mean, we saw how
series
well
that spun other series. So, why would you discount all of that?
Don't bother.
Didn't see it.
As long as they don't make another Godzilla movie, I think I'm.
Yeah, oh, man.
I'm okay.
I blocked that one out.
It's just sometimes it's best. If someone creates a series or creates a universe, to do it once and leave it alone. Isn't that right, George Lucas? Oh, did I say that out loud?
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, but last week we said what a great foundation the movie was, right? And now I think that watching this pilot, it just shows you how they took, it shows you kind of how small that foundation was in a way, and how the writers and on this one took it and just expanded that foundation. That was the true springboard for all of
expand some of
the rest of the series and Atlantis and universe and everything coming up.
That people step through, they're dematerialized, they get sent through the wormhole in a transporter beam, and then rematerialized at the end. And that's why they come through cold, is because that initial shock. They do retcon that later, though. Also, the tumbling out of the gate does get retconned later. So, something to look forward to.
Right. So was anyone else
they were
watching
gone for,
it again
12 hours?
surprised at how fast they put up that iris?
Basically.
Oh, okay.
We already have it. We're great.
I was wondering about that, and this comes
and then it's
up,
like amazing
in the next episode. But when they put the iris up, they close it, but then they just open it back up. I'm like, why don't you just leave it closed? I mean, maybe that's something they'll explain later on, but I feel like if you got that problem, just leave it closed, and they're not going to be coming through.
Yeah, well, I think
it looks cool.
I guess, yeah.
Well, it looks really cool when it closes. It goes.
You got to have the swoosh.
It disrupts the visual.
They will show eventually people getting eaten by the swoosh.
Oh, nice.
Where somebody's standing in the wrong place, wrong time, and whoop, they're not there anymore. And maybe that's, I don't know if that's ever been the in-universe explanation, but that seems like a good explanation to me. Is the whoosh would take out the iris.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do get our first thuds against the iris in this episode too. I think there were 3 Jaffa who stepped through without realizing the iris there, and so that's something you always have to. They use that for great dramatic effect, where instead of actually showing someone meeting a horrible demise, you'll just hear a thud or see a little blip on a monitor, and you're like, ew.
Oh, that's something else that this episode had that the others don't, and it was probably a Showtime thing. Blood. There's a lot of blood and gore for this show because we don't usually see any.
The staffs didn't cauterize the wounds yet, I guess. Later on, they'll get with the staff and there's no blood. And you're like, oh, I guess it cauterized the wound when it hit him or something.
As a lightsaber effect.
I figured all that was for shock.
Exactly.
Shock and awe. It just lends itself to being more family friendly again. You don't have a lot of, like, the nudity will be gone. You don't have curse words. I don't think ever that I can think of off the top of my, and then you don't have gore. You don't have a lot of just ugly shooting to kill people. They tend to deal with, like, grapple with the morality of it. So for us, being able to watch it with our kids.
We got the claymores in this one, too, for the first one. And that's kind of like their go-to weapon early on. And it's that whole A-team effect where if somebody gets hit by a grenade, it doesn't blow them apart. It just makes them like fly off and, fly over a wall or something. So you have these people being hit by claymore anti-personnel mines and they're like, and falling down or something. And
gotta sneak the Wilhelm scream in there somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that helps with the longevity of shows like this, where you can go back and watch them even 20, 30 years later with your family. Because like with the new Star Trek series, like I'm going to show my son the old Star Trek shows because I grew up watching those. But I'm probably not going to show him Discovery. If he wants to watch Discovery when he's an adult, he can, but I don't see the reason.
No, that's good. A good point. And, it wouldn't surprise me at all, though, with the fact that they do cut out the blood and the gore. They do cut out, there's no nudity or anything. That's probably a lot of Richard Dean Anderson.
I was going to ask that.
Yep.
Because I know that was kind of one of his guiding things with MacGyver. He always showed him doing different, like, working in with children in these, inner cities and things like that. Well, I know for a fact that was a lot of his encouragement as he became a bigger star doing this role of, now I want to show this character doing things for people, especially children.
And in MacGyver, the original, when he was doing it, correct me if I'm wrong, but he had a rule that his character could never shoot somebody, right? Or use
once.
A gun. Mm-hmm. He did once?
He did it once.
Okay.
Yep.
He shot somebody once, and then after that, they're like, this is not something the character would do. And I was doing the math, which wasn't that difficult, but this premiered almost 24 years ago, and I was looking, well, what were the movies that were out, in 1997 when this premiered? It was, Austin Powers, Men in Black, science fiction. It was Gattaca, Fifth Element, Starship Troopers. This is right when Deep Space Nine was going from season 5 to season 6, just to make anybody who watched those things while they were airing like feel old. It is kind of interesting that into that, into that we have this show that, I wouldn't say it's timeless, but it definitely, seems as relevant or as enjoyable today as it was when it first came out. And a lot of those movies and TV shows, you really can't say that about, like Time Cop, for example.
Nice. Yeah. Now, other than some of the dated effects, which are pretty easy to overlook, really enjoyed it. It's got the same kind of thing going on. Yeah. It's nowhere near as bad as Babylon 5, but it just shows that when a show has a good story, you can overlook any sort of datedness from the effects.
Well, and these effects were not that in your face either. I mean, you had the biggest effects you really had was, of course, the gate, and that didn't look that terrible. There are a couple of scenes I did notice, like when they're walking into the gate and everything kind of slows down as they step through.
Yeah.
To do the special effect with it. Other than that, there aren't a lot of special effects. You got the blast from the staff weapons and things like that. And I think that helps a lot. Of course, you have the replay of the gate travel effect, which gets cut down dramatically, if not completely cut out following. This is like the one episode, because the pilot, they had to show the full effect of going through and the stars whooshing by and all that. You don't see that a lot anymore after this.
And I think they took that just straight from the movie.
I read that last time that we talked that, it was an effect they brought over.
And if you don't like the special effects in this version, apparently the 2009 edit, they did a George Lucas and added in a whole bunch of different effects, which addresses another one of my problems with the episode, where you have what appears to be a death glider appear and then like 20 Gould and Jaffa like beam out of it. And you're like, whoa, this is wrong. Right. They make it clear that that's like a Hatak, one of those cargo ships. And then the death gliders are separate.
Right.
So.
My 14-year-old goes, when did a death glider ever carry 14 people? I thought, good catch.
We got introduced to like the Gould UN in this episode too. It's like when they're all going through Apophis's harem and stuff. I don't know, like I don't recognize any of those Gould. They're all wearing like their weird costumes and stuff. I don't think they're tied to any like specific ethnicity or time or place. But yeah, so that was something kind of interesting too, because we don't yet have the idea of the system lords or anything like that.
But they are developing the fact that there are more of them, because there are some of those people. It's clear that they're not just helpers or servants. They are Gould themselves, because they've got the voice. The modulated voice, and to show these are of the same race as Ra and Apophis. We get to see Chulak for the first time. Of course, they make it sound in this like it's the city, and then they retcon it to the planet later. That's a place that you get to see very often that just happens to look like British Columbia, unlike half the planets in the universe.
Planet Vancouver.
Well, the ancients were very particular about where they settled their people.
They like the climate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing we get the first time here, like one of the, almost not the first, but one of the very first spoken lines of dialogue in this is Jaffa, Kree.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And so we'll be hearing a lot of that.
Nice. All right, well, I think that'll about wrap it up. But before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Stargate, including Aaron L., Morgan N., Jacob K., Richard L., and Alexandra S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Be sure to follow the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or the SQPN YouTube channel. To find previous episodes of Secrets of Stargate and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate. You can email us at stargate@sqpn.com or follow StarQuest on social media and Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on Twitter at SQPN. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode of SG-1, The Enemy Within. Until then, Father Cory Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Stargate.
Thank you much.
Lisa Jones, thank you as well.
You're welcome, and see you next time.
Victor Lambs, thank you too.
Thanks, Jack and Kree.
And once again, I'm Jack Barazzini. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Stargate on StarQuest.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?